Thank you for joining us. We've got a kind of a cool day well, I guess we'd call it cold down here in Dixie. Uh, understand it's 19 degrees in Tuscaloosa. My name is Bill Baker. I'm with Firestorm, and we're so pleased that you can join us for this webinar. We'd like to kick this off by offering our congratulations to the University of Alabama football team. That was a marvelous game, and they had a marvelous competitor in Clemson. Congratulations to the University of Alabama football team. This is part of the Crisis Coach webinar series that is presented in conjunction with the assistance of the College of Continuing Studies at the University of Alabama. Our presenter today is Jim Satterfield, the president of Firestorm. We're going to be talking about crisis or consequence management. This is the first in the 2016 group of these webinars. We'd also like to invite you to become our friend on Facebook, Firestorm Solutions. Follow us on Twitter, Firestorm Soul. There is a hashtag. That hashtag is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. Please keep in mind that our presentation is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion, and this information and the work product provided should be read in conjunction with advice from your organization's personal counsel. In addition, do not interpret the advice or comments given as legal advice or legal opinion. We're delighted to have the University of Alabama College of Continuing Studies as the underwriter, host, and co-sponsor of this series. You can go to firestorm.com, watch past webinars in this series, and register for future webinars. Our moderator today is our very good friend, Brenda Truelove. She's with the College of Continuing Studies in Tuscaloosa. Brenda, over to you, please.
Good morning, Bill, and later on, Jim, good morning to you, and thanks for the good thoughts about the wind. I'm happy that we're past that, and all is well, and looking forward to Championship Parade this weekend. The College of Continuing Studies here on campus of the University of Alabama is really in the business of helping individuals and companies pursue their educational goals and career paths for their employees. And we are really excited about the 2016 year. We're going to be really focusing on corporate training, custom training, training in the workplace to help individuals get the skills and knowledge they need to be successful in the workplace. We are very excited about our continuing partnership with Firestorm, and they're always our great partners to help us really let people know about the programming we have that will help their businesses and their employees. We're highlighting today a program that Jim Satterfield will be our keynote luncheon speaker this Thursday, January 21st, at the Bryant Conference Center. The topic is cyber force security, risk, and mitigation. We have an excellent speaker and lineup for the day. David Smith will be our speaker for the day, and Mr. Satterfield, Jim Satterfield, will be our luncheon keynote. The target audience are business executives, IT professionals, and management teams. We will be focusing information on the ability to understand the context of cyber to your organization and to be able to advocate for basic security processes. We need to make sure executives have a good working understanding of the potential cyber risks to their organization, and we will be detailing the processes and procedures for determining your risk and the executive's responsibility. I think that's the area that David Smith, who's the member for the Intelligence and Security Academy, will be focusing on cybercrime, cyber espionage, cyber warfare. He's co-chairman of the FBI's Information Technology Study Group, and he's a member of the Secret Service Task Force on computer-aided counterfeiting. Jim Satterfield will deliver our luncheon keynote, and I've already seen his slides, and I'm looking forward to it as well. So we're grateful for this opportunity. January 21st, Bryant Conference Center. The registration information is showing on your screen. Basically, 205-348-3000. At this late date, people will need to call for seating and reservations. So thank you again for the opportunity, and looking forward to the rest of the webinar today. Jim?
Well, thanks, Brenda. And I'm excited about being over in Tuscaloosa on Thursday, and the conference will be excited. I know that there are a lot of executives that are planning to be there. And as we think about cyber breach and cyber risk, it's a business problem, not an IT problem. And we'll talk more about that on Thursday. If you get a chance and can be in the Birmingham, Tuscaloosa area, it's certainly going to be a good investment of your time. So thanks today for joining us. We're going to talk about crisis, and certainly cyber is one of those, and then the consequence management related to it. I'm Jim Satterfield, President and CEO and founder of Firestorm. We asked a survey question this morning about what do you anticipate to be your organization's greatest need for support this next year. And if you look at the squeal that's here and dividing it up, cyber risk is one of the large concentrations at 14% down below. Training and testing, tied over with crisis management and communications, business continuity, risk management. We're going to get a little bit into planning and intelligence today, because that's going to impact every single area to help as we move forward. I would encourage you to think about that each year with your team as you look at your plans and see relative to what's out there, where you are, and what you can do. So as we think about this and think about crisis being blending of risk and danger and opportunity, to know where your emphasis would apply. It's a turning point in an organization, and all future events will be determined by that. An earlier survey that we did last year pointed out that most organizations, less than a third, are using external intelligence to identify potential threats. I think in today's world, having a predictive intelligence capability, having an intelligence network, doing threat intelligence will become increasingly critical. Whether we're talking about violence or cyber threats, there are specific requirements, and in certain industries there are details around threat intelligence that you're required to have, whether it's cyber or behaviors of concern. I know the financial services sector is particularly focused at this point from a regulatory standpoint. So today we're in an unusual world where everything is foreseeable, and tomorrow anyone can be found accountable. When we think about intelligence in this area, there's an excellent chance that someone's talking about that threat or danger or risk that's exposed in your business. And if that in fact moves to action, then later someone will ask, well, why didn't you know? Why didn't you do something? Why did we just let this thing occur without intervening? This concept of predictability and accountability is certainly embedded in us. If we think back into 1993, that was the truck bomb in the World Trade Center. They found the terrorists, found him guilty in a criminal trial, but there was a civil trial, and the precedent-setting case held that the owner of the towers was twice as liable as the terrorist who was trying to blow it up. Wait a minute, I own the building, you try to blow it up, and I'm twice as liable for as you are? Well, why is that? That doesn't sound fair. And the answer is that this was an identifiable hazard and a threat, and you have a responsibility to be prepared. And so I think that is an undercurring theme in everything that we're going to talk about today in talking about crisis and consequence management. How do you know what you don't know? If you look at this circle here, and what you don't know is that big green slice out of the pie there, and then a lot of times we'll know what we don't know. That's the blue slice. But the larger percentage here, what you don't know, is really where I want us to focus a little bit in our thoughts. The conference at the University of Alabama coming up in a couple of days is going to be looking at this in particular around cyber. Next week we're going to be doing an exercise in New York City around workplace violence and active shooter. If you're in the New York City area and are able to attend, that's next Thursday, let me know and we can coordinate that. Next month we're going to be doing an exercise, a virtual exercise on workplace violence. So our challenge now is to zero in on what you don't know, because the more we can reduce that and move it over into that green slice, the better off we're going to be. Now, you will remember that Firestorm follows a predict, plan, perform methodology. And we're really going to be emphasizing, excuse me, the sneeze was at no extra cost today, and we have our germ filter on the webinar today, so it shouldn't come through the line and get you. But focusing on the predict, understanding what the threats and vulnerabilities are, what are their impacts, financial, operational, and specifically, what are you going to monitor and what's the trigger to activate your plans, is going to be a way to differentiate how you perform in 2016 in this risk and crisis environment that we find ourselves in today. So today it's a way of how do we take our plans and move them up to the next level, and that's by focusing on it. Now, we always are going to want to know before now. If your boss is aware of something that you're not, then generally you're going to be at a disadvantage. That's not a pleasant position to be in. So it's our job to know about these events before they escalate into a crisis, to have our plans and have them activated and being able to respond at each level along the way. So most of you, when you think about your plan, say, well, gee, Jim, we do an all hazards approach, and we've done a hazard matrix, and we've identified them, and we've looked at onset, and we looked at duration. We've talked about the impacts, and we've organized those in triage. Or maybe we've done a vulnerability threat assessment for our location. And so we are aware of those things. And we've identified the risk. And we've even looked at business crisis risk. And you've heard us talk about that, and I'll mention it again briefly on a slide. But those are the business operational risks that could be underlying within your business: turnover, product recall, other types of exposures that are going undetected as you run your business every single day. So what I want you to do now is to stop and think about every one of those risks that you've identified, every one of the hazards, every one of the vulnerabilities. Have you identified that the warning signs are for those areas? Now, many things don't have a direct ability to be seen. Fraud in a business, you don't ever see fraud, you see indicators of fraud. And so one of the things that we're going to think about for every hazard, every risk, every vulnerability is, what are the warning signs and what are the indicators? Now, if we're seeing this going on, then we need to understand what's the trigger. At what point do we say this is so severe that I need to now take action? It's maybe not already gone into a violent situation, it's already not gone into another area, but we need to start responding and thinking about it. So we're going to focus on triggers. And I'm going to give you a new tool today that should help as you think through the vulnerability analysis or the hazard analysis that you've done in planning. Now, we've introduced in other webinars at other times this concept of guarded, elevated, and severe. I'd like you to think about that in terms of each and every risk and hazard that you've identified. You know, as our background level, we're always on guard. We're always aware of what's going on. If we suddenly start to see some things about to happen, then we move to an elevated state, and then if it's a very high probability that's going to occur, we're going to be at a severe. Now, you've heard us use terms like this in talking about communicable illness: guarded, elevated, and severe. We also talk about it when we see behaviors of concern, when the person is starting to exemplify issues that we need to be concerned about in looking at that. But the same things hold true with each and every risk that you have identified, and we want to carry that forward into our planning. Now, you've heard us talk about the 5 common failures in any disaster or crisis, and this is Firestorm's 10th year anniversary year. We've crossed that threshold now and been operating since 2005. And very early, we identified these 5 common failures, and we've seen it proven over and over again that they're highly present in disasters and crises. The first is failure to control critical supply chains. Today, most people only own 10 or 15% of their supply chain, and that has a dependency on outside parties. From a regulated environment, you're starting to see now that vendor management is a key driver for regulators across all sectors in knowing can they do what they say they can do when they can say it. By the way, we're also finding, to go back to the cyber breach reference that's going to happen on Thursday, one of the largest single points of failure in cyber breach are your critical vendors, whether you're thinking back into the Target breach or the Home Depot or the others. So these has held true across all of the exposures that we're seeing. Second is failure to train employees for working at home. 70% of employees don't know what they're supposed to do on the job. 95% don't have a plan at home. Third is failure to identify and monitor all threats and risks. Many companies have done a pretty good job of identifying threats and risks, but most have done a terrible job in establishing a monitoring program for each and every threat and risk, and that's the intelligence network that we're talking about today. And the reason the little red arrow here is we're really zeroing in on this failure today, and that's what we're going to be talking about. And then fourth is failure to conduct exercises and update your plans, and last is failure to have a crisis communications plan. Now you saw each one of those following the predict, plan, perform methodology that we've talked about. It's critical that you involve the groups and functions that you see listed there, and then conducting the exercises, and then finally you've got to establish how you're going to monitor. That's the intelligence aspect, and then the communication at each point. Now, as we think about those, we've got lots of different needs at various points and to identify within our organization. Now, there's a lot of risk and threats out there, whether it's the tornado that could come in, the winter storm that might be coming in to across our area tonight, but it could be defective products, it could be intruding board members, it could be competition, leadership areas. These business crisis risks are embedded within each of our organizations. And the only way that you can identify your organization's next crisis is build an intelligence network. So I would encourage you to set a priority for this year to go back and look at the work that you've already done in identifying the hazards or the threats or the risks and saying, okay, what's a warning sign here? What's a trigger? What's an indicator? So that we have that and assign someone to be able to do the response level. So can you really identify a crisis and predict it before it occurs? And the answer is overwhelmingly yes. Every time that we've gone back and done an analysis in a crisis and we reviewed, there were warning signs that went unheeded, and it made a difference. Now, we are talking about San Bernardino and the homegrown terrorism attack that was done there back at the end of last year. That event was workplace violence. It was an employee who came back. There were predictable signs and indicators, and we're seeing those repeated over and over again as we look here. So if you had learned the indicators, if you were aware of that, you can see it before that gun comes to work, or you can see that these factors are starting to occur. So the real value here is identifying pre-crisis what the indicators are, so you can see and understand that crisis before it occurs. Now, this chart is the predictive model around business crisis risk that you've heard us talk about in other webinars, and that blue box up there is the one with the natural disasters or the violence events that would come in. Here, speed is quality. It's an acute problem. It's more targeted, but there's a sense of urgency that's going to do that. Other things that happen within the company follow those business crisis risk from difficult to chronic to severe. You might have some disruption, some failure to communicate, lack of control in your business processes. And if you don't address those, they become chronic, systemic within it, the metrics fail to detect it, and there's a deterioration, and as it becomes more complex, it escalates up to a severe business problem. And now you've got regulators involved. You've got your financial community and maybe calling loans, and you see these businesses move into a death spiral. If you were to go back and look at the Fortune 500 over the last 3 or 4 decades, you'll start to see a significant transition in who's listed in those groups. And name brands that we all know and recognize that were household names when we were growing up are not necessarily in that position today. And that's where this business crisis risk element starts to come in, and why your intelligence becomes such a critical aspect. So I want you to think about the formula you see in the header on this slide. Information plus insight equals intelligence. That's really why we're having the conversation today. That's why we're thinking about understanding these things before now. You've got some information. It's your insight. You're in a position of authority within your organization. You have responsibility over business continuity or other programs within your structure. And your insight will then create that into actionable intelligence. And that's really what we wanted to focus on today, to talk about this as we move forward. Urgency is a function of what's going on at that particular point in time. One of the key elements, if it's a crisis, then it's immediately urgent. The sooner you know, the better to respond and carry forward to make sure that your plans are actionable and your people are trained to become involved. And so your ability to understand that and look at what the warning signs and indicators are become very important. Another urgency factor is compliance. What's the regulator asking you for? We just finished working with a large bank and had gone through an audit, and the regulator identified a whole series of problems in that. And so that creates an urgency to come into play. Or fear of loss. You in an area where there's, in the summer, hurricanes, or California with earthquakes, other exposures that would come in. Is it a brand and reputation-driven event? And those are the types of things that can destroy your company so that you cannot come back. By the way, cyber breach is one of those elements in the brand and reputation. If people don't think they're safe there, they're not going to stay with your business. If we look at what's been happening in some of the brands that you've known, the Chipotle, and the food quality issues that have been raised there, and the disruption that could be caused. Or if there's cost savings or revenue, both those things are possible if you take your information and your insight here and to design your program. So these risks are embedded within the organization. It could be the way you're structured. It could be a breakdown in operational or functional processes that cause them to occur. And if we don't eliminate them, there's going to be an impact on your people, on your profitability, and on your brand and reputation. So our goal here in our conversation today is to focus on these risks before they occur and to think about them. So if we're talking about information and insight, how do we know what we're looking for and when are we looking for it? You've heard us talk about the stages of escalation in a crisis event: pre-action, onset, impact assessment, crisis response, recovery, and then post, the consequence areas, the post-recovery. So you've got different information needs at each one of these stages, and if you're going to be creating this intelligence network to think about what it is you don't know that you don't know, let's think about the pre-action. Do we have a plan? Has the plan been tested? Have we trained our people? Do we have the supplies that we need to have in place? Do we have a monitoring system that will look at the triggers for our plans to tell us that we're going to activate and to be able to get ahead of the disaster or the crisis that's occurring? Now the event occurs, and we're focused at onset at life and safety issues. That's the activation of your emergency response plan. How are you communicating with your people? How do they know what you want them to do? Lockdown, lockout, shelter in place, evacuate. Those are going to be your big concerns. Getting medical assistance for those that may have been harmed by those events. Then we shift into the impact assessment, and you're going to need information there about how many people were hurt or died, or what's the impact on our brand and our reputation, or on the community around where we're going, and having those intelligence elements coming into play. If it's bad enough, we're going to declare a crisis, activate our crisis management plan, get our senior leadership involved in making those decisions. And then with our business continuity program, we would shift over to activate individual departmental plans to get those back up and recovering so that we can return back to business as usual or to a new normal. And then afterwards, what are the lessons learned? What information can we gain from that to go back all the way to update our plans to either make sure that it won't happen again or that we can mitigate it in those areas? So every one of these stages has an information requirement that requires you to be able to monitor it, have triggers and warning signs and indicators, and then go into specific action. Now, if we think about, there's a lot of risk out there. Where do we want to put our emphasis? Well, if you look at a vulnerability analysis and you map all of the risk and threats that you have, looking at the impact versus the certainty that they would occur, those things that are low to medium impact, that's normal operations. That's why management has a job. I wouldn't spend a great deal of time focusing on setting up the warning signs and indicators there. But once it moves up to a high impact potential, then you've got to have a contingency plan. You have to have an intelligence network set up to be able to identify that. And clearly, when it's in that danger quadrant, high impact, high certainty, this is going to be what differentiates your organization from everyone else out there, is your response, and that particular quadrant will make the difference. So let me share a couple of new thoughts with you today. Sometimes we're talking about a risk derivative. Now, we remember derivatives and all the financial market crash and investments that created problems, but here we're looking for some things that we can monitor, some things that we can track, that we can understand, to be able to see that this event is likely or going to occur. I shared with you that fraud cannot be seen, but you can see evidences of fraud. And so there's an example. Attendance within your company. If people aren't coming to work and you've got a 20% absenteeism rate, that could be an indicator of a communicable illness. It could be a severe weather area. It could be fear, that they're concerned about what's going to happen at work today. It could be behaviors of concern. Think about somebody that has always been on time and now they're late, somebody that's been easy to work with and they're argumentative in meetings. If they start making mistakes, there's something that's happened in that life. And so those are indicators that there's an issue that we want to intervene in. Communications. I was speaking with a group that in one of the states this last week that heads up all of the emergency contingency planners associations in that state. There are multiple. And we were talking about workplace violence and active shooter and what needs to be done. And I asked how many of them had intelligence networks or monitoring programs for that within their company, and they indicated that they didn't. Well, if we're all concerned about that, and violence is now a way of life for every one of us in different levels, whether it's the active shooter or the homegrown terrorism, civil unrest, years ago we had the Occupy Wall Street, we have the Black Lives Matter, we have other events that are causing the civil unrest. Those are issues for you to think about, but around all of them there are communications. And the statistics are that 80% of the time if someone has ill intent, somebody else knows. And 67% of the time, 2 or more people know. And when people know, they talk. And where do they talk today? They talk on social media. And that's out in the public domain, and you can track it. Your location could be a risk derivative. If you're sitting in Miami, that's going to give you a certain set of exposures to the area. If you're in LA, you've got a different set of risk. And even if you think about Memphis, and they're sitting right on a fault line associated with it. The social media, the weather, there are many samples of these risk derivatives, and what we want to do is now think about those. So take your all hazards approach, your matrix that you created, or your vulnerability analysis, and in the left-hand column in this blue table down below, write those down. Then next to it, write down what you see as a warning sign or warning signs that could be something to be aware of. What are the indicators that you're looking for? What tools and medium do you need to be able to activate those? What's the specific trigger that you're going to say, well, when it gets to that level, we're going to intervene, we're going to do something? And then think about it on a guarded, elevated, and a severe level. If you understand those areas, you'll know where you are. Now, the graph in the upper right-hand side of the slide is one that I would like you to think about. So as you think about every one of your risks, and I've created a little rose-colored curve there for a particular risk exposure, and the blue line across is kind of at a neutral level, you're seeing that even if the risk level is low at this point in time, we still want to be aware and monitor and be on a guarded area we would have trained our people, we'd have the monitoring in place, we'd have the tools, we will have tested our plans. If suddenly we see that start to escalate, and it could escalate on a slower curve or a steep curve at this point, as it starts to get to an elevated, if it moves beyond where you're saying that line exists, now you need to step up a higher level of response associated with it. And finally, when it comes to a severe level, it looks like it's highly probable it's going to occur, the interventions or the actions that you take are going to become absolutely critical. So what we're trying to do here is to take the intelligence that you gathered, the awareness, and convert it over into actionable steps by you. And wherever possible, we want this down in the hands of your people so that they know what to do and when to do it. Now, when you think about this is a set of cyber breach indicators right here, and we divided it into information assets and technology, brand and reputation, and user experience. So if you think through and look at these things, this could be an indicator that, wait a minute, something's going on, we need to do more and learn. And so this is a type of a statement that you could take on each one of the risks and threats that you've had to train your people on what they need to do. That becomes an important element so that you have a chance of creating a human firewall that you can identify and recognize at this point in time. So, and we can also convert these into activation matrix. And I've included a couple of samples here just to give you a feeling. And the one on the left is a larger company, and they've looked at minor events, incidents, and business crisis. The minor events, they're normal operations. That category 1 are incidents, and if it goes to category 2, they're business crises. And you can see that this company's focused on data security, facility, human operations, power, social media, and workplace violence. And so they came up with descriptors of what they would be seeing to activate their incident response team. And in some cases, they had different ones, like look under facility. If it was one level of damage, you're not notifying the executive committee. If it's a higher one where it could be an extended disruption, yes, you would. And you'd see clearly at that highest level, the category 2, executive leadership wants to be notified immediately to take control of those things with brand and reputation, ethics, legal, merged media, and regulatory. But it doesn't only apply to businesses. If you look at the right, you'll see a church service event activation matrix. It's taking the same concepts that we talked about here and converting them over. And they were concerned about an imminent weather event, imminent violence outside, imminent violence inside, but not in the sanctuary, imminent physical threat in the building, collapse, fire, bomb, emergency medical, and then finally imminent violence in the sanctuary. And so here's the action that they want people to do, the message they would send out, what the ushers would be responsible for, and then what the crisis team would be doing that way. So but if you take a look at these indicators, if you take a look at the awareness and start mapping it into where your concerns are, you can see a difference. Well, awareness indicators, now these are converted into an activation matrix for this organization. Again, the impacts, information assets and technology, brand and reputation and user, and then describing these 3 levels, and think guarded, elevated, and severe as you move across this table. Here's a way then for them to ultimately look at and control and educate their team to be able to respond in each of these areas to make sure that their plans come into play. So for you, as you've created this and focused on these indicators, you can build similar matrix. And so in one piece of paper, in one chart, everyone in your organization will know where they should emphasize and what they need to do. So if we're going to think about intelligence networks, we keep coming back to 2 words, listen and look. And you want to know these things before the event escalates up to a crisis. Listening is where we're looking at the conversations. What are our people talking about? What are our customers talking about in our phone calls, in our emails, in our messages? And then what's going on? We think about social media and the information that's out there in the public domain, streams, phrases, words. Now, we've seen the monitoring of social media occur by probably your advertising and marketing teams that are at work. Are we getting the kind of results there? But the listening gives us this background awareness level. And what we're looking to do here is to identify an event, a location, or a person of interest. So this point of interest, whatever it is, then we would look specifically at it and identify what the risk and threats and exposures and vulnerability are. We're working with a company right now that has 800 restaurants around the country and setting up geofences around each one of those restaurant locations. And we're looking in a 1-mile radius because they're concerned not only about what happens at their location, but what's happening in the neighborhood of that particular restaurant. If there was civil unrest, if there was violence, if there were drug deals going on. And we've uncovered threats against employees. We've uncovered drug deals going on within the organization. So understanding this, of what you're looking for, it's this targeted awareness level that comes into play. Let me give you a couple of quick examples, and then we're going to talk about next steps. If you saw this, I'm going to kill someone at work today, wouldn't you want to do something? This is a one we picked up last summer. It was a real one. We've deleted the reference so you for protection of everyone that's involved. But now listening has told us there's something going on. And then we look a little bit further that they want to kill themselves, and look specifically about what they were saying, and looked at other messages both in this in-work environment and that were appearing. We set up a geofence around a distribution center and identified an employee that was having conflict with his boss, viewed it was racial, and the only way to resolve it was to bring a gun to work tomorrow. Those are the types of things that we're looking at. So when you want to move from these warning signs or triggers into how do we implement the process and who you're going to assign it to follow up so that we can say this is what's going on and having a support. So as you're creating the intelligence network, you then have to implement a process in order to be able to manage that and follow up. So if you have a well-designed program here, you have to have the escalations. What are those triggers, guarded, elevated, and severe, to make sure that you're taking the appropriate action in each element. So if you map those things out and have a workflow, nothing is going to fall through the cracks. Many times we're finding within the organizations that the information gets siloed. Not everybody knows everything they're supposed to do or say at that point in time, and it becomes extremely critical, in fact, that we do. So when minutes matter, the seconds count. And so the quicker you have that actionable intelligence, the quicker that you're able to move, then the ability to prevent or mitigate these events from escalating becomes extremely critical. So what happens once the warning signs are triggered? There's a lot of things out there. There are a lot of choices. And so do you know? Do your employees know? Do you have your security team involved, or your HR if we're thinking about violence? If it's cyber, those are different notification folks. But as we view this environment, once this warning has occurred, once this trigger has been set, it gives you the opportunity to take action instead of standing here like this gentleman trying to figure out what he's going to do next. So I'll give you one more set of examples. Look at this report about a database administrator and how it turned into being a terrorism charge and got escalated through the process. All of this came because somebody was aware. Someone became aware and recognized that, and then there was a system in place to deal with it. Think about your organization. Do you have this in place? Because when we think about what you know, think about what you don't know that you don't know, and then finally that last big section, what is it that you don't know, that's where we need to focus. So it comes back to, do you want to know what's going to happen tomorrow? Can you afford not to know? There's some things that you can do. You can participate in the virtual exercise next month. We've done an expanded format. It's 2 hours, and we're going to be talking about workplace violence and active shooter. The February 8th will be for businesses. The February 18th will be for schools. We're expecting 1,000 each in those sessions. You can go to the University of Alabama and attend the CyberForce Security Risk and Mitigation Conference. That's this Thursday, the 21st. You want to make sure your plans align to standards and best practices. Begin to build that intelligence network now. Work on it through the year. It'll get better and better, and your ability to be able to identify these events before they escalate to violence will become very critical. Also, putting your plans on smartphones will be a great way to make sure that everybody knows what they need to do when they need to do it, and that's a differentiator, or schedule some training. There will be a brief on today's webinar. You can go to the Firestorm.com and download it, talking about crisis or consequence management. You can also go there to view other webinars that we've conducted in the past. I want to thank the College of Continuing Studies, the University of Alabama, and particularly to remind everyone again about the Cyber Force Security event that's coming up. Brenda, do you want to add anything about that event or about today's webinar?
Well, just want to thank you, Jim. I always come away from the webinars learning something myself, and just so much material out there, and I know it can seem overwhelming, but you've got to start somewhere. And so a good overview for senior level executives would be to attend our session this Thursday, and I know it's going to we're going to learn some more from Jim and from our other speakers as well. So we're here to support. If individuals have questions, just give us a call.
So please do that, and you can reach Brenda directly at 205-348-9066. I mentioned the virtual workplace violence events coming up next month on February 8th or 18th. We also are doing one in New York City next week on the 28th. It'll be in person. If you've got an interest in that, feel free to reach out to us at Firestorm. This webinar series and the others that we're doing are part of our 10-year anniversary celebration and part of our commitment to help improve all of our companies to do better in the face of the violence and threats that are around us. If you'd like to listen to this webinar again or share it with someone in your organization, you can go to firestorm.com and there'll be a link to a recording. You can also fill out a contact form and we'll be back in touch with you, or send us an email at webinars@firestorm.com, or you can pick up the phone and call us at 800-321-2218. There are risks and threats around all of us. There are vulnerabilities, and I know we've said and spent time working on our plans in every organization. I would challenge you this year to do something different, to spend time and effort to build your own intelligence network. That's going to be the thing that gives you that edge, to give you that advantage as events start to escalate around you. You want to know about all of those things before now, before that threat becomes action, before the gun comes to work, before the cyber breach occurs. So the differentiator now, if you're trying to move the plans within your organization to that next level, is the building of this intelligence network. That's going to determine, is this crisis going to have consequence later? Is it going to be a situation that we will have and we don't have to worry about the impact on our brand and reputation, that we can make a differential here for us in every area? So for every one of those risks and threats, identify the warning signs, identify the triggers that are calls to action, and then continue to have that reporting channel coming back to your team that's responsible in this area, to you, and have it set up. The alerts could come automatically from some areas, whether it's a weather alert or a monitoring of traditional and social media. Those could come to you directly so you'd know who to focus on and where your problems are. That's what I would encourage you to think about this year as we build our plans to align the standards and best practices. Thanks everyone for being with us today and spending 45 minutes talking about crises and consequences and planning for the next year. I would encourage you again about the conference this week at the University of Alabama or the event next week in New York City on workplace violence. Have a great new year. Happy New Year to you all, and thanks for all you do every day in your organization to make sure the company's prepared and to make sure everyone's safe. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Goodbye.